Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Lesser Known but Awesome Heroes. And today I'm actually going to be pulling double duty. I'm going to be talking about two characters that I feel should be in the Avengers movie, as do a lot of fans, but unfortunately will not be there, so I figured I would talk about two original Avengers members. Actually, two that were founding members of the Avengers. So the first one I'm going to kick it off with is Hank Pym. Yes, the former Ant-Man, Giant Man, Goliath, Yellow Jacket, Wasp. Holy crap, he's had way too many aliases. He's had those are literally, I think I hopefully named off all his aliases. But Hank Pym, who apparently was discovered by Infinity as being the scientist supreme of the Marvel 616 universe. And Hank debuted in Tales to Astonish number 27 in January of 1962, and he was created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Larry Lieber. Now, his team affiliations is that he's been part of the Avengers, West Coast Avengers, Mighty Avengers, Secret Defenders, Defenders, Avengers Academy, and the Secret Defenders. Yeah. Avengers, West Coast Avengers, Mighty Avengers, Secret Defenders, Defenders, Avengers Academy, and Secret Avengers. Yeah, try saying all that really fast. But he actually had a partnership with Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, who I'll be talking about after I get done with Hank here. Yeah, Ant-Man, Giant Man, Goliath, Yellow Jacket, Wasp, and he's been known as Scientist Supreme. Interesting fact is that he has extraordinary intellect with a PhD in biochemistry, along with expertise in fields of quantum physics, robotics, cybernetics, artificial intelligence, entomology, etc., and is one of the top minds in the Marvel Universe aside from Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. He has size-shifting abilities. He can go from being nearly microscopic to 100 feet gigantic, both at extremes. He has the ability to transfer his size-shifting ability to other beings and objects. He also has bioenergy projection, also known as a biosting. This was particularly useful during his periods as Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket. He also has flight via grafted wings during his period as Yellow Jacket and Wasp. And also, when he was Ant-Man, he had a helmet that allowed him to actually talk on the same radio wavelength as ants. Because for those of you that don't know, I'll give you a little science lesson here. Ants actually communicate via high radio-esque frequencies. And when Hank Pym discovered this, he crafted a cybernetic helmet that allowed him to, quote-unquote, talk to the ants. Which thus actually allowed him to, I don't want to say befriend ants, but he was able to talk to any ant or any insect that talked within this same frequency. And we've seen him do this in Earth's Mightiest Heroes a couple of times. Oh, excuse me, he'll talk to ants, he'll talk to wasps, termites, etc. So, Hank is a really super smart guy. Like, we're talking hyper intelligent on a near level, if you will. He was one of the founding. Back when he was Ant-Man and first teamed up with Wasp, they were actually two of the original founding members of the Avengers, alongside Iron Man, the Hulk, and Thor. Back when Loki tried to take over Midgard. This was before Cap came into the picture, and it was right around the time that Captain America joined the team that he would become Giant Man. And then later on, he would eventually adapt the guise of Goliath, which he would then prominently try to retire and would pass that on to Clint Barton, Hawkeye. But then, of course, the title now has pretty much been passed on to Bill Foster, who is known as Black Goliath, and was an apprentice or even partner for Hank Pym. So now Bill Foster is known simply as Goliath. However, Hank would then make the Yellow Jacket outfit. However, sadly, and I sadly, I gotta say this, even though this is a very huge blemish on Hank's record, one that I wish people wouldn't hold against him, but there was a time where, yes, there was a panel where he did slap the hell out of Jan. And this was back during the time when they had gotten married and were a couple. And the sad part about Hank is that he's had a lot of marriage issues with Jan. A lot of mistrust, especially since that panel when he actually physically smacked her out the way because he tried to create a robot that he was going to stop to try to, in a sense, like make good with the Avengers because they felt that they couldn't trust Hank. He felt like he wasn't being a hero, or that the general public wasn't trusting him because of the fact that he created Ultron. Yes, believe it or not, Hank Pym actually did create the robotic supervillain known as Ultron. For those of you that haven't watched Earth's Mightiest Heroes or read any of the comics or anything, yes, the robot supervillain Ultron was actually created by Hank Pym, and interestingly enough, Ultron's brain engrams that rule his central core were based around Pym himself. So he basically thinks like Hank Pym, which thus makes Ultron a very dangerous foe. And I'm hoping that they don't do that for Earth's Mightiest Heroes, but anyway, to kind of cap this all off with Hank, he's really kind of one of those characters that he's been given kind of a bad rap because of that panel where he hit Jan. And also the fact that Jan got killed, he basically was blamed for, the creation of Ultron, and that presumably, the Skrull version of him nearly took out Reed Richards and impregnated Tigra. So now he's got a genetic tiger, kid with Greer Nelson. I gotta say, Hank Pym has been beaten down to the nth degree and just had a lot of bad stuff happen to him. But nevertheless, Hank Pym set up the Avengers Academy. He's now part of the Mighty Avengers back as Giant Man. And it seems like, at least from what I've been reading, Hank has been really refocused. Like, he's really starting to basically get over his guilt and everything bad that's happened to him and become a stronger person. And I admire and respect that. And also, I feel that he's kind of lived up to his memory of Jan. And speaking of Jan, let us move on now to Janet Van Dyne, also known as the Wasp. Alright, now we move on to Janet Van Dyne, also known as the Wasp, the original Wasp, and she was also a founding member of the Avengers, and she was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and her first appearance was in Tales to Astonish number 44 of June of 1963. Now, she started out as a personal assistant to Hank Pym, almost like a secretary. However, eventually she would discover that Hank was Ant-Man and wanted in on the action. And so, Pym pretty much reluctantly made a suit for her, and she called herself the Wasp. And her suit originally had size manipulation, and her pretty much as the Wasp, she had size manipulation, flight, bioelectric energy blast, and telepathic insect control. Now, one thing I forgot to mention. Now, what's interesting is that the picture that you see here, that's about ready to go off here, is actually the ultimate version of Jan. And the ultimate version of Jan, she's actually a mutant, and all her abilities are mutant-based, and Hank created the Pym particles from her blood. And the beating and he doesn't just slap Jan like he did in the regular 616 universe. Oh no, he beats the hell out of her and then eventually gets his ass kicked butt naked by Captain America. But we're not going to get into the ultimates. For many reasons. It's Mark Millar, that's all I need to say. But this is actually Jan's original look here. But Jan's team affiliations that she was part of the Avengers, the Mighty Avengers, West Coast Avengers, and the Lady Liberators. And there was a bit of a flirtatious air between her and Hank for a while in the comics. And then eventually, finally, the two just actually admitted their feelings towards each other, kind of ironically, like in the Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon. And they both kind of started to become an item, and eventually they got married. However, they would have a very, very rocky marriage, as I described with Hank. And they would eventually become divorced, and she would fall in love with somebody else. This led Hank into despair. However, they would rekindle in, I think, 2005, 2006, I want to say. But in 2008, Jan gets killed off. And this, like I said, it spiraled Hank into becoming the next Wasp, because he felt that to him was appropriate. But we're talking about Jan, but I've already talked about Hank, so I'm going to focus on Jan here. Now, I will admit, Jan was not one of my favorite Marvel female superheroes. She really isn't. But at the same time, Jan is pretty cool for who she is. She's innocent, in a sense, Hank is more like the talky, thinky scientist type guy, always trying, much like Reed Richards. The only difference is that unlike Sue, who just kind of goes with Reed being, Reed, Jan does not allow Hank to be like the science nerd that he is. She'll be like, come on, Hank, there's an art gallery, I need you to attend. He's like, no, but I'm working on, like, trying to do something sciencey. And Jan will actually physically grab him and be like, she'll do like the physical, like, mom grabbing you by the ear type shtick. Be like, come on, you're going. You'll just see Hank just be like, ah, and just be like dragged along. And I will admit that's one part of Wasp's personality that I always kind of liked. I always liked the fact that Jan was like a take charge kind of woman. Like she would literally put her foot down if Hank was not paying attention to her. And that did lead to a couple of arguments, but it always led to Hank being like, you know what, you're right, I should pay more attention to you. You are my wife, and I love you. But I'm not going to get into the whole. I realize I'm being a little weird about that, but I'm just saying, I think that was always kind of a great chemistry between the two of them. But anyway, with Jan, trying to think. Yeah, there's not really much here significantly for Jan. She has participated in like Secret Invasion and Civil War and whatnot and what have you. It seems, and also one thing, and also eventually the character, like many other women during the 70s, had like an empowerment of sexuality, and George Perez made a joke about how he was always constantly like redesigning like a new costume for Wasp nearly every issue of the Avengers or every other issue. That it almost became a joke that Jan designed her own outfits. Thus, that gave her a way to fund all of Hank's experiments because she was an interior designer. Not an interior designer, but not an interior designer, but basically she does a lot of fashion stuff. I'm going to leave it like that. She does a lot of fashion stuff. She goes to fashion shows and this and that and other things. And that's, I will admit, is one cool thing about Jan, is that even though she is a woman, and I'm not saying it as a sexist way, but even though she's a woman that enjoys shopping and all the girly things, I do like the fact that there was a great sophistication to her character. That she tried to be very articulate, if you will, in her interests, going to art galleries, fashion shows, and whatnot. So that added I will admit, a great degree of femininity to her character. But anyway, guys, I could ramble on, but that is Hank and Jan. Two very obscure and kind of left out characters, but nevertheless, Still awesome.